We're going to learn how to put divs next to each other, and so I'm going to get rid of this margin that I have on this girl div here. And I'm going to make another div to go next to the girl div. Why don't I get over here and I'll just call it other div. So I'm going to make a class and call it other div. Give it a little curly brace, closing little curly brace. Maybe I'll give it a width of 250 pixels. I'm just making stuff up here. And I give it a height of 300 pixels. I'll give it a background color just so you can see it easily. Maybe I'll make that background color pretty bright red. I think that's pretty good to be able to see it. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go on down. Here's all that girl div right there. So I'm going to go next to the girl div and I'll put another div. Div. I called it, if I remember right, other div. So it's class equals other div. The div has to have some kind of content or it will collapse just like a cell. So I'm going to write something in there. Close the div and I'm going to go check it out. So when I reload, you notice that the div actually don't sit next to each other. Divs by default actually won't sit next to each other. They'll kind of get pushed down to the next line. But we might want this hi there div to be sitting up here next to the div with the girl in it. So what do? Well, if only there was a way that we could get things that normally don't show up on the same line to kind of sit up next to each other and maybe wrap around each other. I'm talking about a float. You remember floats? So the way to get divs to sit next to each other is you float them. Now you are going to have to float both divs because by default they'll both push each other down to the next line. So all I have to do is come back into my code here. I'm going to get up in my girl div and I'm going to say float is left with a semicolon, and then I'm going to do the same thing down here to my other div. Now when I save and go refresh, check this out, they show up right next to each other. Alright, see if you can do that. Put two divs next to each other, make sure that they both have a float left applied to them, and watch them float up next to each other.